Hi, so we have an interesting topic this week. Our topic this week is biotechnology ethics. And it covers such a huge range, and we kind of focused in a little bit on DNA, more or less, with a couple of sidetracks. Well, I'll show you what that's all about. But there's so many different topics that have to do with bioethics. If you want just a quick overview, just go to Wikipedia, look up the biotechnology page. There's a ton of stuff there. Biotechnology gets used in medicine. That's kind of the obvious one that we think about. But it also gets used in agriculture and in industrial settings. It has to do with environmental concerns. There's lots of regulations that have to do with biotechnology. It's almost endless where biotechnology comes into play. And it's a really interesting subject because we can do some really interesting things that can really help people, might have some implications that we hadn't thought about. So let's take a look at what we're going to do this week and some of the topics that we're going to talk about, and we'll go from there. If you go to the playlist link and you click on the little, hamburger icon in the corner, it'll list out all the videos. Now, keep in mind that's not quite all the resources because this week there's actually an article and a podcast, and I can't put those on a YouTube playlist. So I think you'll find these interesting. This one in particular, it's long. It's another one of those UC San Diego ethics videos, and it's about 52 minutes long. But I really like the way she does it. First of all, she's a very interesting speaker, and this topic is a big deal. So, what about your genetic privacy when we have all of this big data? And we've talked about privacy and big data previously. And so it'll be interesting for you to see how this ties in with genetics, because how would that work? One of the things I like is she takes a couple of different case studies and presents them to her audience and says, kind of here's what happened and here's who the people are. And then she has them talk amongst themselves. They don't show that in the video, but you can tell because they go to her talking and then they, splice over to the audience talking. Because she asked them a couple of questions like, what are the big issues here? And who are the stakeholders? And are there any other questions we should be asking or any other information that we need to solve this problem? And it's very interesting. So she does that, I think, with 3 different case studies that I think you'll find interesting and relevant. So that's this one, your genetic privacy. This other one, because that one's so long, the second one is only 5 minutes long. But again, I think you'll find it quite interesting because one of the topics I bring up this week is this whole area of DNA testing, like 23andMe and Ancestry.com. There's several different ones. And they're really cool because you find out like if you're German or South African or from Indonesia or whatever, right? You can find out what your ethnicity is with a pretty high degree of certainty. But there's also some unintended consequences. So it's really short. It's got the transcript here, but they bring up some really good issues to consider. Some things you probably didn't think about if you've taken those tests. So coming down here to the Learn section, I did put a crash course video in there about biotechnology, just to give you an overview of what biotechnology actually is. This article, The Ethical Use of Home DNA Testing, again goes into this. This is one of those University of Texas case studies, and this shows a different angle on the DNA testing with some discussion questions. You should see if you could answer those questions. You might find them interesting. And then, of course, Elon Musk. Oh my goodness, he's always got his hands in something, and this is quite a provocative cover photo that they have here. This is from a source called The Verge, and they put out lots of videos. He had a big launch recently where he demoed Neuralink and actually had some pigs there that were implanted and talks about this. This video actually talks about that a little bit, but then goes into some of the ethical issues that are involved. And then finally, this Henrietta Lacks, the Tuskegee experiment and ethical data collection, because you can't really talk about experiments without collecting data, and experiments are the heart of biotechnology. You have to try stuff out, right? And so something you might not know is about this Henrietta Lacks story. And this is an early use of biotechnology. This happened in the 50s. Actually, I believe she died in 1951, so probably the late 40s. And she was pretty young when she died. She was 31, and she actually had cervical cancer, which at that point they didn't know really too much what they could do about it. So they cultured the cancer and they gave her radiation and all this, but she eventually didn't live. What was interesting about her case, and I should link to this also, this Henrietta Lacks at Hopkins University, and so, or the John Hopkins Hospital, is it gives a little bit of background on here. So she started undergoing this treatment, and what they had done is taken a cell sample and sent it to this other doctor's lab. Was a prominent cancer researcher, and what he found out is with cervical cancer cells, they typically died pretty quickly. Like he couldn't really do any research on them because they didn't survive. Her cells, however, not only survived, but they thrived and they doubled every 20 to 24 hours. And for the past, well, since like 1951, that's quite a long time, her cells are still in use. They call it the HeLa cells. They've been growing these cells and they use them to study toxins and drugs and hormones and viruses on cancer cells. And so they can do this on the cells without experimenting on actual humans. So that's interesting. Where the tricky part came in is they didn't actually bother to tell her or tell her family that they were doing this research on her cells. So they're doing this biotechnology research, but they didn't inform the family. And they've made quite a bit of money probably off of the treatments and stuff that they've developed, and the family didn't see any of that. So you might be interested in looking up where that's at, where that stands now. Anyhow, this video talks about some of those different issues there. So down here in the Learn, on the ethical use of home DNA testing, on that article, I also linked, that's the case study. I also linked to this article about the hunt for the Golden State Killer. Investigators uploaded his DNA to a genealogy site, and it turned out to be a match. I want to say it was to like a third nephew or something, like a great great nephew or something not horribly close, but close enough where they could make that connection and find out where he was. And that's fairly recent. And then also on Elon Musk's topic, I put, here's the Verge video. That's the one I linked to in class. The second link is a short 14-minute kind of a highlight reel of the demo. And the full demo is over an hour long, but I went ahead and put those in case you might find those interesting. I remember I watched the full demo a couple of weeks ago and I was just like, oh my goodness, this is a little crazy.